trusting your intuition in parenting highly sensitive children. Well, welcome, Lauren Hunter. Thank you so much for being here today. I'd love to hear a little bit more about you professionally and what it is that we'll be talking about today.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy. Thanks for having me. I'm a writer, a communicator. I've been a PR consultant and an author most recently. So have done a lot of things. I'm also a musician, which I always did as volunteer. In the last couple of years, I've gotten to do that more as a profession. So I'm what they call a multi-potentialite. I don't know if you've heard that phrase. She's like, I
have not, but that's totally me too. There's too many amazing, fun things to do in the world, and it's hard to choose just one. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah. And I'm also a wife and a mom of 4 kids. So it's like, I forget like the biggest chunk of time is sort of devoted to all of that. And so, but it is totally a part of my identity. And that's why we're here, to talk about intuitive parenting and HSP kids and all that good stuff.
Yes. So you recently did a guest blog, and we'll be kind of expanding on that, on the topic of trusting your intuition in parenting highly sensitive children. And I'm guessing we'll talk a little bit about that from the perspective of, I believe, both of us also being highly sensitive parents, which is another sort of added factor in that. But yeah, I'm so excited to have you on to just kind of share a little bit more about your experience and share the things that you've learned along the way as a parent of four children. Is that right?
Yeah.
And having your older children be, I believe, out of the house. So that's a different perspective than me. I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I'm still very much in the thick of it.
Totally.
As a mom. So yeah, thank you so much for introducing yourself. And I'd love to spend some time just learning about how you discovered that you are a highly sensitive person, because it's not something that everybody knows about. Some people have some confusion about the trait. And I think for a lot of people, when they find out about it, there's a sense of, okay, like this clicks. I understand something important about myself, and then can sort of take these steps to attend to my unique needs and my own unique strengths. So I'd love to hear what your journey was around discovering.
I would love that. And that ties into another thing that I didn't mention, which is I've been a writer and a blogger, and I started hspresources.com. I think about 1.5 years ago. I have to look at the date when I started it, but I am all about the journey together. I love that as my author tagline. And so this journey, it takes each of us like on our own path, and you're going to have different facets of things that you love to do and ways that you serve people. And so for me, definitely there was this intersection of understanding myself, as you know, and you've probably talked about many times, like us HSPs, like we have this like deep yearning to fully understand our identity. And many of us, like, we're not parented the way that we needed to be parented as kids. So there's a lot of like restorative repair, therapy, trauma, things that my story includes some religious trauma coming out of a religious cult that I was raised in. And so mine is a little more like complex, which is not like an official term, but everyone understands that when you have multiple areas. So that intersection of identity and trying to parse out like, who the heck am I and what makes me tick? And I think that it seems to be that many HSPs are very, very interested in that, and kind of the self-help, and interested in the way our brains work and how we tick, and then looking at the people around us and how we can interact with them and how we can achieve our goals. And it's multi-layered. So for me, like, I had done Myers-Briggs and was into that, INFJ, that you learn you're like this tiny little percentage, and then always professed to be sensitive, but it wasn't something people like, you tooted your horn about it. I came up kind of in the generation where people, you're too sensitive, like, stop crying. Your dad's telling you stub your toe and you're crying, and shake it off, walk around the living room, you'll be fine, And so many of us can relate to that kind of harsh parenting, typically from the dad, but it could be from the mom too. and had parents who were not especially tuned in to my needs, which is hard. Like, it's super hard. If you know your kids are sensitive, I'm sure you have listeners who are like, have sensitive kids who are not sensitive themselves, and then also people who are sensitive and have sensitive kids. Like, it's all hard. You could also, none of you could be sensitive. It would still be hard. Like, parenting is hard. Can I get an amen?
Oh yeah, amen. That is very true. Yeah. But you're absolutely right. Different challenges and different strengths for parents who are highly sensitive and parents who are not highly sensitive, who are parenting highly sensitive children. They both are valuable. They're both needed. And I think it's just about learning more about yourself so that you can, and learn more about your child so that you can make the connection and the parenting and the parenthood journey the best that it can be for everybody involved.
Agreed. So my story, I didn't come across the highly sensitive person trait and name until I was 40. So, and I'm 46. So that was 6 years ago. And it totally rocked my world. It was like, oh my gosh, like, this is it. Like, this is the explanatory factor that I needed to stop doubting. I love all the language around making sensitivity your superpower. And kind of have a graphic on HSP Journey with nature, and it says, be sensitive, be free. And so I love that sense of like, there's freedom in knowing who you are and freedom in being sensitive, and that it doesn't have to be a hindrance. It doesn't have, there are side effects, right, to the sensitivity trait, such as anxiety, which are big, but once you learn, oh, this is how my brain works, and this is how I'm reacting to things, and getting those tools in place to know how to deal with that and know what safeguards to put up for yourself, how to protect your energy, like all those things, you can shift something that one day it was the biggest thing, albatross dragging you down, to the biggest thing that makes you tick and who you are, and can really, I think, ignite a new sense of powerful identity in you. And so I'm passionate about that with my kids, helping them understand. And not all of them are like super into like the labeling. They're like, one is like skeptical, like, I don't know, she's the most sensitive of all. She's like, it's like, I don't know about this label, Mom. Like, why do we have the label? And it's like my husband chirping in her ear. And I'm like, okay, like, let me know when you want a book to read, and I'll I'll share some.
Well, I think in some ways it's about reclaiming that too, and reclaiming the word sensitivity. It reminds me a bit of the movement to reclaim the word fat. And for people who say, I'm fat. And for many years when I was growing up, that was, you never, like, do not say that word. You don't say it to someone else. You don't say it about yourself. That's wrong. And sensitive, I mean, it's not quite as culturally ubiquitous, but it's in the same vein of like, that's wrong. Like, being sensitive is wrong. Like, it's not, you should be something other than that. And I've kind of been inspired by the movement of people claiming fat as an adjective about themselves, and in the terms of sensitivity and being an HSP. And can we follow their example really in saying, hey, I'm sensitive, and not expect this, or would work with people when they have this sort of like knee-jerk reaction of like, that's bad, including ourselves, including our partners or family members, and our own kids too, that maybe there's some education to be slowly done with the people around us about, hey, sensitivity is, as you said, it's a superpower, it's a freedom. And yes, there are parts of being in the world that we live in that can make it very challenging to be sensitive, but there's also so many gifts that we have to offer ourselves and the people around us, and the world at large, that sensitivity, one of my favorite facts about it is that it's actually evolutionarily conserved. So there's a reason why 15 to 20% of the population is sensitive, because it has been helpful throughout human history to have a contingency of the population that has this level of sensitivity. It's good for humanity to have sensitive people. And I love that. It felt very validating when I learned that. We
probably kept people alive, like during the prehistoric era, right? Like, we're hearing the footsteps like 10 minutes before the lions or whatever, like, about to approach.
That's exactly it.
I hear something. They're like, no, really, they're
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's literally it. And, it brings me to another kind of fun fact, and then we'll get into kind of a little bit more of our topics for today. But I'm developing this course for parents of highly sensitive children called Supporting Your Highly Sensitive Child. And one of the things that I bring up in it is how parents, or how highly sensitive children are more likely to do this pause and check behavior. They're more likely to want to observe, to kind of check it out, to weigh out the pros and cons, even from a very young age. And so they're less likely to jump into risky situations, especially shows up as for teenagers, but even for younger kids, that what we might see as stop being so cautious, it actually has a benefit to them, and that they're not jumping into situations that are physically or emotionally risky for them as much as other kids might. And so, yeah, that much as we as adults can create a sense of safety and security within ourselves and for the people around us, that highly sensitive kids also have that sort of superpower, that on the one hand, we could look at it and say, why are they like this? Can't they just be a little bit more courageous? Or why can't they just jump right into this like other kids I'm seeing? But on the flip side, you see that they're really measured, they're conscientious, they're thinking things through, they're self-protective. And so there's some real benefits to be seen there as well.
Yeah, that's so true. As my kids, so my oldest is 20, and then I go 20, 17, she's almost 18, 15 and 13, and I go boy, girl, boy, girl. So
Wow.
I've had I'm almost through all the every gender and every phase, so call me. No, I do coaching as well. I know you do coaching and therapy.
Oh, cool.
But it's so interesting because even though it was only 6 years ago, a lot of things, I think we HSPs, even before you know much about it, if you do have a good sense of yourself, how you parent is sort of innate, or you're very, very aware of gathering intel and reading books and taking what you need out of one book and taking what you need from another, resource or podcast or whatever, and kind of amalgamating this way that you parent. It sort of, I think, happens innately. It's not something that you're picking off a menu. But I love that in terms of choices. I've learned some takeaways that I've learned with my own kids with pause and check and being careful is, number one, not to ask them to make a decision about something instantly. So as well as I do, it's only with 5 and 8-year-olds, the activities and the activity level, just skyrockets from here on out. And so you have a kid who likes to play soccer. Well, then you have a friend, another parent who says, oh, do they want to try out for the competition team? Well, whoa, pause and check. Yeah. Every sport has a competition level that is there's recreation level, that's a normal amount of activity and practices, and there's a competition level. So over the years, as the kids have had, even dance has a regular level and a competition level. So we've paused and checked through that and been like, okay, one will say, I want to do soccer. Okay, great. We're going to do rec soccer. If you find that you love this, we will look into competition if you want to, but we'll evaluate it. And just having that mantra, and this is good for us as HSPs with boundaries, right? To not say yes immediately to some new opportunity as it comes in, pause and check, take it in, review all the time constraints, review what's going to happen, and then make a level-headed, decision, which is hard sometimes. We don't want to make, we make it emotionally charged decision, but that backing up and going, okay, I'm going to write down all of the things that would be required if my kid does comp soccer, and I'm going to write it down. I'm going to leave it in this notebook on my desk, and I'm going to come back tomorrow and I'm going to sleep on it and look at it, and then I'm going to talk to my kid. We're going to talk about it, and then a couple days later we're going to talk about it again and see where they fall. I found that to be super refreshing, because honestly, often it's the kid who says, I don't think I want to commit to that level. I like the lower level.
Yeah. Absolutely. In fact, it's so funny that you mentioned that, because my 8-year-old, who's my highly sensitive kiddo, just did that with guitar. So he does soccer and he does guitar, and actually he does competitive soccer, but it's because he loves it. He cannot get enough of it. And my
which is awesome.
Totally, my husband's into it, and he's like I will take him to all those practices. And I was like, okay, cool. Like I can't handle that, but as long as you guys are both fully on board, that's fine. But he was doing guitar for a while, which I thought was a great little HSP activity. And he kind of was like, mommy, I like this, but I kind of need a break from it for right now. And it was a little hard for me to let go because I love music and I am a musician myself. And but I learned, I paused and I was like, I need to listen to what he's telling me. And he's saying he needs a break. He can come back to it. Doesn't mean he can't even just pick it up, on his own occasionally. But the lessons a couple times a month was too much for him on top of the other things he has going on. And so I love what you said about just listening to your child's wisdom too, especially I think once they hit kind of that school age and they're really able to be aware of their own needs. If you slow down and collaborate with them about what do we want to spend your time.
That's a great word. That's a great word to like stop and pause for a second, just go, like collaborative, that maybe doesn't sound that great. You're not asking a bunch of parents to like collaborate on your parenting, but collaborating with your child to give them some agency in their life. You know what I mean? So like authoritative parenting is like, that's probably the worst style to like try to meld if you're an HSP and if you grew up with that, and you might feel like that's the way you have to parent. But really that collaborative, because once you treat your child, not treating them like an adult, like get the checkbook out, let's pay some bills, not like that, but like treating them like, this is my husband's a high school teacher. And so we both feel this way. Like we talk to our kids like they are smart, valuable people. Whether they're 6, nobody's 6 anymore, but even when they were 6 and now they're, young adults, that's how they become good decision makers eventually. Cause like, we're not just raising, and I think it's hard sometimes to lose sight of that, especially like me, I had a bunch of little kids, a couple of years apart. And so you lose sight sometimes that the end goal is this well-adjusted adult who becomes an adult friend. You become a parenting coach. And then that parenting coach, you eventually become a parenting friend where you are more of an equal with your kid. And there's, that's probably 30 or up. But my 20-year-old, I verbally said to him as he's in his second year of college, but I verbalized the things that were hard for me as I was trying to learn to let go. And, but I said, I'm going to make mistakes. That vulnerability, being an HSP parent with an HSP kid, I think that they really appreciate that vulnerability and being able to, I blew up. I had a medical procedure. My daughter also had a strained ligament in her foot. And so the two of us, we joke, we had 2 good legs between the 2 of us. But I blew up on her the other night. She's 17. Like she didn't always read the room very well. And I was in the middle of something and I was in a lot of pain. It was the end of the day. And I like went up to her room, later that night. I was like, hey, I blew up on you. I'm so sorry. Like I was exhausted. I was in pain. I was answering an email that was making me cranky because of the situation with a work thing. And she's like, oh, I get it. Like we have had to do that so many times with each other. And I don't know if you sense that with your 8-year-old, but there's more. I think there can be more conflict sometimes when we are wired very similarly with our kids, especially if it's the same gender and sensitivity, and depending on how high strung, I feel like there's not a good, like there are some quizzes, and I have some on my website about the scale of which you're, what level of sensitivity, because there are some really super high functioning extroverted HSP people you couldn't probably pick out that they have some of the same challenges because they, everyone is wired. So even though like y'all listening, even if you have the same Myers-Briggs, and I found this with coaching clients too, same Myers-Briggs, same HSP, a lot of other things common, totally different personalities. Like it does not exactly tell you like what their personality is. Like it is a personality trait, but there's so many nuances and so many unique individuals out there. And that's true of our kids, right? So you can pick and choose some of the HSP language, teachings and things like that. You can kind of look at your child and see like, okay, are they over processing? Are they are they especially, like, I have one who's especially sensitive to sound. That
Yep.
is his heightened superpower. But he's not a musician. It gives him headaches. So, you
Mhm.
know, I have to check in with him about certain things when I can tell he's like morphed into this grouchy version of himself. And I'm like, what's going on? Are you okay? It's a headache. Oh, go
Mhm.
up. Like, you get a free pass. Go up, tap out, go in
Mhm.
your room, be quiet.
Yeah.
You don't have to participate. You don't have to, you know, you just have to know what's making them tick.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk some about the intuition elements that go with that article that I wrote?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I'd love to. So I feel like we kind of like organically talked about some of the challenges and some of the gifts of having a highly sensitive child. And I love that you just named that, you know, kids are unique and parents are unique too, right? So part of the intuition, I think, will be just coming at parenting and parenthood from that framework that it's not a one size fits all journey. And that part of it is getting to know yourself as a parent and your own needs, and part of it is getting to know your unique child and observing them and helping them put names to their feelings and their needs over time. So yeah, I really appreciate you sharing kind of your own experiences with the challenges and the wonderful things about being a parent to an HSP. But yeah, let's move into some of the intuition piece, and moving. You mentioned in the blog that you wrote about needing to move away from comparison and needing to move away from kind of exclusively looking outwardly for solutions. And that's not to say that, I mean, we are talking about it. Like, hopefully this podcast is helpful
Yeah,
for
it's
you,
a
right?
resource.
Like,
This podcast is
and
a resource. Yes.
right. So definitely not like abandoning outside resources or supports, but just taking it with a grain of salt, you know, and learning that you're going to hear professionals, you're going to hear writers, you're going to hear podcasters telling you things that probably are going to be a vast spectrum of, hey, this is how you should do it. And that, I think, one of the most important things is, you know, knowing when to disregard, knowing when to say that might have worked for you, but that's my child's different, or our situation is different, and we need to do things in this way. And I think especially if you are a parent who's highly sensitive yourself, that I've noticed HSP parents tend to really hold on tightly to what other people say is the right way, in quotes, to do things, and have a really hard time just listening to themselves, even though, and I'm sure you'll get to this, but even though their intuition is usually so powerful, it's hard for them to actually follow through on it, because there's so much noise coming from outside about what they should be doing.
Yeah, you bring up a really interesting and valid point there. It's something that I've thought a lot about too, is um, boundaries. So I feel like I've been working my whole adult life to like reclaim boundaries, or relearn or understand better boundaries. And there is like a lot of intel about like HSPs not having the best boundaries. I know Julie Jelland has done a ton on that. But it's still like, even though I've read a lot of things like that, it's still coming together for me in my mind, like as to why. And as you were talking, I was thinking that perhaps one of the reasons is, and this is a superpower, but maybe this is the negative side of that superpower, where, and this served me really well with public relations clients when I started out in my career, because I could get into the head of people. So that ability to like jump inside someone, you feel their energy, you can't even really talk about how you do it, but it's like getting like ghostwriting for someone. Like I would ghostwrite for these executives, and I would not get to spend a whole lot of time with them, but you know, you amalgamate all of these, you know, the website copy and the press release, and you talk with them, then you have a meeting with them, and you get all of this information, and then you sort of regurgitate it in their voice. And so that happens naturally. And it's not something you can, yet that empathy. So it's like, so I don't know, it feels like something related to that ability to like tap into the brain of someone else that makes us feel like, as we're listening even to a podcast and we hear people talk and we resonate with a couple of things, and then we think, oh, my brain does this, I don't know if yours does, I'm just like them, or they're just like me. And so sometimes if you're already thinking in that mindset and then you get to a point of recommendation where it's maybe not going to fit your family, you're like thinking, oh, we're totally simpatico, like this is totally for me. And so I think that trying to figure that out, like, oh, I can relate to 5 or 6 things this person has said. And I've even felt that with you as we're talking and communicating. Oh, this is somebody who gets me. Oh, this is somebody who, shares similar interests. And that doesn't mean we're naturally going to agree on every single parenting style or, coffee selection or whatever music choice or whatever.
Right.
So, but there is that natural innate sense in me to like link up with someone and then feel like, oh, we have to have everything in common. And we don't. Like, we can have two, and this is true for anyone, you can have 2 or 3 or 4 things in common with a resource or with a person or with a group. And you could say, oh, I appreciate these 3 or 4 things, but then there's 2 or 3 things that I really don't like and don't agree with. And that's okay to live in, accept the tension of those things. That's where I'm working on improving, because the tension I'm not so good with. I feel like peace and harmony all the time in every corner of my life should be the way that we're all aiming, but that, as I get older, is not a reality. And so then experiencing tension in a couple of areas, even with kids, even when you're like, hey, I think this is best for you. And that's another area that's super hard for HSP parents, because we want to link, we want to feel connected. And when you have to discipline, there is a disconnect, like it can disconnect you for a little while. That's where, you have to drop the hammer on someone who isn't following through with whatever you ask them to do. Like, don't bend over backwards and let them get, they're kids. Kids have to learn how to be obedient. So you can have that tension, and that's where like that relationship with your kid, like you can be their parent, love them 100%, appreciate their sensitivity. You can be mostly sensitive to their needs. And at the same time, you could say, but you also need to go to bed by 8:30. The light needs to be out. Or there'll be a consequence tomorrow. Ooh, no screen time tomorrow. I held that over one kid. Loves SpongeBob. No screen time tomorrow after school, before she got a phone. But it's very nuanced and it is complicated, but I don't want to say the word complicated like, oh, be afraid. Because there's beauty in complicated things, and our parents experience that with us, and we in turn get to, it's a privilege, right? To parent these kids. It doesn't last forever. So, I mean, if you're sitting here thinking, oh, I remember 5 and 8. Yeah. You're thinking, I've got a lot of elementary school years in front of me. Yes. It does go, elementary drug on for a little while for me, because I have 4 of them go through, but it does speed up. Something happens and it speeds up. So all the foundation and the groundwork that you're laying with your kids, and if you're listening, you've got toddlers and you don't even know if they're sensitive yet, like, gosh, just savor these moments, because they go really fast. They don't always want to climb in bed and snuggle with you. So when they're 20, it's not appropriate anymore.
Yeah. Although my 8-year-old HSP still loves cuddles. I'm like, it's happened forever. I don't know.
Keep it up.
But yeah, you mentioned kind of this tension, which is something that I hear from especially non-HSP parents that I'm friends with, or one that I'm married to, around this. Well, we don't want to coddle. We don't want to like. Right. What if he can't control his crying and then he gets bullied? Or what if he doesn't know how to manage, manage his emotions? And so that's something I've been really reflecting a lot on, especially as I've been developing this course, is this tension between accommodating your child's sensitivity and nourishing their needs and responding to their needs, especially when they're little. But then as they kind of get into this, I'd say like older preschool and school age in particular, there's also this need to build resilience and to build and to kind of push back and to shape them a little bit. And how do we do that with, I mean, that's a whole other podcast episode, but
Totally. But it's a brilliant topic. And an example that popped in my head is being at a fast food restaurant with the oldest one I wrote about in this article, because he was a super high need baby who is now not that he doesn't think that he's an HSP. I still kind of think he is, but he manages his stuff just wonderfully. But we were at a fast food place, and I think maybe the age range was like 10. We're probably at In-N-Out. I'm thinking it was In-N-Out. It's lunchtime, so that came to mind. But there's times when you encourage your child to advocate for themselves in very simple ways. Parenting 101, send your kid up to the counter to ask for a fork, to ask for more ketchup, to ask for, a bigger request would be something is wrong with their burger. They need to go up and ask the manager to fix their burger. And so for the longest time, he refused to do that. And I think he was maybe 12 by the time, 12 or 13, which is kind of late, because most like late elementary school kids, like, they should feel like they could go up to an adult in a safe environment and ask for what they need. But he took longer. But once he, there were pause and checks over many years. And then once he felt like he could do it, he never needed my help in that area again.
Yeah, I feel like that is I don't know that it's talked about too much, but that's such an HSP kid. It's a strength of HSP kids that when they do that pause to check, you're like, oh, come on. Like as a parent, sometimes we have that internal monologue of like, can you just,
am I doing it wrong? What am I failing at?
Yeah,
why won't they, what's wrong with me? What me. No, it's not you.
We don't, right. And ideally we don't communicate that too much to our kids, our frustration, but you're so right that when it's common that once they actually reach that level of confidence, they kind of don't look back and they just kind of can cruise forward with it in that particular skill set for a while. And so it's something about building, we talk about like window of tolerance, building out their window of tolerance slowly, steadily, not pushing them so far outside their comfort zone that they're going to become overstimulated or they're going to become, they're going to dig their heels in and
right.
frustrated.
Or have a panic attack or an anxiety attack, which that happened to one of my kiddos at this big giant Girl Scout event. And you go from, these kiddos need prep. They need preparation. So in theater and in dance, you never go out and perform on a stage that you haven't practiced on. So like you have tech rehearsals. So my girls did theater, and you have like 6 nights of tech rehearsals in costume on the same stage by the time you get to the 6th time you've gone through it. So it's like you're building up that tolerance to the environment. By the time you get to like, okay, there's people in the crowd, you have done it so many times, you're not afraid of it. And so that can be true of other things, but, think of yourself as a parent, or not even as a parent, think of yourself just as a person when you've been thrust into an environment that caused you like initial, like awful anxiety to well up in some way, like whether it was as a kid, like going to high school for the first time and going to a class, or, whatever that environment is. I think those are important like memories to bring up as you're parenting, to think about, wow, I totally had those same moments. And you might even feel like you can share a little bit with your child. It helps them a lot to know that you've experienced the same kinds of anxiety or peer pressure or whatever the thing is. Some adults I know today will not go advocate for themselves if something is wrong in a public place, and that's just a wall. They would never, go up and talk to a manager at a restaurant if something was bad or whatever. So, there's a lot of valuable ways you can, get more tools to help yourself and help your kids at the same time, right?
Yeah. It's as you were talking about the burger, the In-N-Out situation, it reminded me, I'd totally forgotten about this, but as a teenager, my mom, I remember I was probably 14 or 15. And she said, hey, I'd like you to call the doctor to make your doctor's appointment. And I was like, what? Excuse me? Like, no, I dug my heels in. I was so desperately uncomfortable for me to do that. And yet I'm like, as an adult, like that's something I need to do it regularly, right? Like it was a critical skill for me to build, to hop on the phone. And some of it was like phone anxiety and some of it was talking to adults. It was all mixed up, but I needed to learn that. Like I needed to learn it before I was like launched into adulthood, is this ability to pick up the phone and call someone.
Totally. That's
and
where like
so
that coach hat. So, people listening, you can even do this when your kids are elementary, and definitely middle school. It's like middle school is a huge transition from like you are parenting them and scheduling all of their hangouts. And I got told, Mom, don't call them a play date anymore. It's a hangout. I'm like, oh, okay. That means you can do it yourself, right? But there's this period where you are doing some of it for them and encouraging that, and one of my kids is not super out, like her comfort zone is not initiating things. And then I feel sad if she didn't initiate and nobody has scheduled something with her. And so I just try to prompt, like, hey, are you thinking, do you have any plans, Friday night? Oh, well, what do you think? Is there somebody you want to hang with? Like you could text them, and that still doesn't always work, but letting them, have some choice in what they do and who they reach out to, but you also are kind of like ready to jump in if you need to, because you still, communicate with parents, even actually with high school kids. Like we have a great community, and I'm friends with some of the parents of my kids' friends, and so that's really valuable too, if you can kind of be family friends with some of their friends. And when some of these issues, there's a lot more issues, right? Teen and tween issues that come up. But sometimes if you know another parent who has a sensitive kid, you can sort of collaborate and like encourage the kids to do some things together to get out of their comfort zone. And that's kind of interesting as well.
Yeah. And, that brings me to, thinking of parents of younger kids too, that's one way to tap into or to honor our intuition as highly sensitive parents, or parents of highly sensitive kids, even, that our experiences might be unique. I mean, everyone's parenting experiences are unique, but when we can connect with other highly sensitive or parents of highly sensitive kids, either way, we get a sense of, like, there's other parents that are doing things that look more like what I'm doing than what I'm seeing, on social media or out in the world, where I'm seeing, this other mom who's taking her kids out on outings every single day of the week. And that doesn't work for me. And I feel bad about that. But, there's this other parent over here who's also doing that, who feels the same way. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why connecting with other HSPs or parents of HSPs is so helpful, is because it gives us permission in some ways, or gives us more permission to follow our intuition, because the intuition is there, right? Like you mentioned that several times in the blog, that your intuition was kind of like a through line in your parenting, but it took some practice, and I totally resonated with this. It took some practice to actually follow through with it, and to discard some elements of parenting, or some parenting advice. Or it reminded me of, there's a book about, I think it was about breastfeeding, that I read before I had my first kid. And it was so intense. I did end up breastfeeding both my kids, although it wasn't an easy journey, but it was so prescriptive and so rigid and so intense. I think I literally threw it. I think I recycled it. I'm eco-friendly, but I was like,
I had a flash of reading Jack Kerouac in college, and I think I threw the book across the room, and that's what, because there's like no punctuation, and so it was like a similar response to like, there has to be some rules, or there has to, like, it just can't be too much either way, too rigid or too permissive, and that's a good way to kind of approach parenting. You don't want to be too rigid, and you also don't want to be too permissive. Like the middle road is a good, safe place. Sometimes you say no, sometimes you say yes. I had somebody else say to me, they say yes to their kids whenever they can, like that was their mantra, was like, I can do it. I'm like, that bothers me a little bit, because like we need these kids to be able to do stuff for themselves. So I'm not going to constantly pick up for them, even though I could do it, because I'm going to
resilience building piece
back
of it,
myself into a messy closet, that I am, that's a sore spot. Okay. I thought of another issue, or another example, and I didn't put this in the article. but it's the same kid, the oldest kid. So he was born in November, and our school system at the time cut off the date to start kindergarten at December 1st. But my husband teaches high school. So he sees kids, he sees the boys, and he's a coach. He sees the boys when they are in high school and they start too early, when they're 13, turning 14. So he was like, we will start our kids late, the boys, start our boys late, not early. And I was like, I don't know about that. And I was like, I really have to trust you because I don't know about this. So because we chose that, he did like the 4-5 preschool when he was, just turning 4. And then he had this weird gap year, and we didn't agree. It was our church's preschool. It was 3 days a week. It was a little expensive. I had just had baby number 3. So baby number 3 was born in August. Preschool started in August, and my husband wanted him, the older 5-year-old, to do preschool again, the same class, because there wasn't another good option. He's like, he can't just stay at home. Like, what are we going to do? So 2 weeks, first 2 weeks with nursing baby number 3, stuck in the parking lot, nursing, driving. It was a 20-30 minute drive there and back. By the time you turn around, you go back. I was miserable. And I was like, what are we doing? And oldest kid comes home on like the end of the first week, or maybe end of the second week. He says, Mommy, this is the same class that I just did. Everything is exactly the same. He's like, I don't think I need to do this same class over again.
Wow.
I don't want to do it anymore. And I was like, are you serious? Yeah, I don't really need to do this anymore. I already did it. I was like, oh, you need to tell Daddy. You need to tell Daddy. Like, so he did. He, in his own words, told Daddy that it was the same exact preschool class, and he really didn't want to do it. And I worked part-time from home and had a part-time nanny that came in a couple mornings a week. And she was from a homeschooling family, so she was fully equipped to bring out the workbooks and stuff. So my husband let us quit the preschool. I was like, so happy, so happy. But we really trusted our 5-year-old. Like, he verbalized what he needed, and it was what I needed, but I didn't tell him. I did prompt him, tell me why you didn't like, I didn't try to extrapolate that from him. I just asked him how it was going. And so that was a really great example of, like, it was intuitive in me, but I was honoring my husband and in what he wanted. And the kid is the one who had all this wisdom and knew what he needed, and we listened to him. So.
Yeah, what a great story. And I think I love that it was actually your child's intuition that came up, and that how often that's the case if we tune into it. And not that we're always right as HSPs, but our intuition is really, I think it's one of our biggest gifts, I think, as HSPs. And I don't know that I've ever had an HSP tell me, when any of my clients tell me, gosh, my intuition really led me astray. I've only ever heard the opposite, and I've really only ever experienced the opposite, where I thought, why didn't I just listen? I knew that wasn't the right choice. And usually it's people pleasing, or it's like the shoulds, or other people are doing it this way, so I should probably also do that. And it's only in retrospect that I'm like, if I would have just listened to what my body and my mind were telling me about this, it would have been so much smoother. And so I think to me, that's one of the biggest, challenges or learning processes for highly sensitive parents or kids. And it's something you can help your child to develop, is when they have that intuition. Again, it's not that it's totally infallible or that you need to bend over backwards to accommodate at all their wishes, but that when they have a sense of, like your child did, that I don't need to do this again. This doesn't feel right to me. Or like my son did with guitar. I need to take a break from this. That, we work through our own stuff if we need to, and then we say, okay, like let's try that out, and let's see. It doesn't mean that we need to make that decision and that we never go back and try again, but that for now, let's see how that works. And it's a lesson in both trusting your intuition as a parent, or as your parent, your child's parent, but it's also about setting boundaries, I think, too, and listening to your own voice and your own needs, when a lot of HSPs tend to kind of go the other direction and ignore their own needs in lieu of attending to other people's needs and preferences. So it really is a valuable practice to tap into our intuition and to do what we can to honor it, whether for ourselves or for our kids.
Absolutely. And I totally agree, and would add another layer that encouraging your kids, even at a pretty young age, to listen to themselves and their intuition. And maybe it's hard to, explain. I love the explanation of like the gut being the second brain, and kind of like, because, you use that metaphorically, like your gut, but then your actual gut is what they call a second brain, with the most nerve. I forget how many nerve endings in your gut, but it, your head and your gut like work in a connected way. And that's why, irritable bowel syndrome, we have some of that in our family, and the anxiety hits and it affects you physiologically. But so that's super interesting, but listening to even like making a new friend, and you can have a gut reaction, but then, encouraging them to listen to that. But also like navigating relationships seems to be one of the biggest coaching areas with my kids anyway, as they've gotten older. And so some of it is this combo of listening to the intuition about themselves and their own feelings about another person, and then also using their sensitivity to maybe ascertain whether or not that person is having their own stuff. Sometimes we can misread, or we have intuition, but it's the dial is off a little bit, because that person might be having mental health challenges or family drama like we've had some of this. And so we've had to talk through like, okay, well, what, think back, did you do anything? Or do you think that they are having some stress? And sometimes it's a combo, but sometimes you need to get in there and ask them, be transparent. That's hard with teenage kids, because they don't want to share vulnerably. Yeah. But the boundaries, that what's my, like the picket fence around my house, like what are the things that I'm responsible for? And so as I've learned all, things through my own life, I try to share them with my kids, like little nugget sizes, is like, okay, what's in your yard that you can be responsible for? And if the other person is like being mean to you, or acting crazy, and you don't know what caused it, like you can ask them, but at a certain point, you are responsible for you and your feelings and your emotions, and you might need to just pull back a little bit and pursue another friendship. And that's difficult too.
Yeah, that is really challenging. Yeah, I think adding on to that a bit too is, I once had a client ask me, well, how do I know if it's my anxiety talking or my intuition? And I was like, wow, what an excellent question. And, not something that we can tackle,
Today. Yeah.
But I just wanted to kind of add that into the conversation, that, if your anxiety is really active and kind of bubbling up quite a bit, that sometimes your intuition, like you said, the dial can be off a little bit. And so I always think about intuition as, it shouldn't create a lot of feelings of anxiety or resistance, that it's really sort of like a deeper inner knowing of, this is what I should do. And sometimes we don't know why. Often we don't even know why that particular answer or that particular path forward is the quote right one for us. But that anxiety tends, the anxiety response and those thoughts tend to bring a lot of fear and a lot of catastrophizing, thinking the worst possible scenarios, whereas your gut, your intuition, is kind of a North Star. It's a calmer sort of knowing. And maybe that's something that we can bring in for our sensitive children too, that if they have this sort of clarity, like what your child did around this preschool situation, that seems like a North Star. That's not anxiety. That's not fear. That's not frantic. That's, hey, this is what feels right, versus, and it was the same thing actually with my kid playing guitar, where he was like, hey, this is what I need. I need to make this switch. And there were other moments, in his childhood where he has really dug his heels in, and I could tell it was from a place of anxiety or fear that was, if I could support him through it, he would actually build resilience and confidence on the other side of it. I'm reminded of a time when he was interested in chess. I signed him up for a chess club, and he was probably the maddest I've ever. He was like, "Mommy, why did you do this? What? How could?" Like, he was furious. He was probably five years old, something like that. And I was like, "Whoa!" Like, I can't believe he was so intense about it. And but when I was able to understand, okay, this is a fear response. He was afraid he's going to be around a bunch of different kids. He was real beginner at chess. It ended up being like an outdoor class. It was during COVID quarantine, so we were outdoors, and it was a really small group of kids. And I ended up saying, "You know what, Mommy, you expressed interest. I already did sign you up. We are going to go." So I put a boundary there. I said, "This is happening, but like, you can sit on my lap. We can kind of sit like, a few feet away from everyone else on the grass, and you don't need to participate the first time. You can just kind of watch and see how you feel." So that's, to me, an example of sort of honoring I guess it's also a window of tolerance, but honoring his comfort level, but also saying, "Hey, this is something that I need you to learn. I need you to expand your comfort zone." And
that's great.
You did great.
That's great. Awesome. That's so great. Just offering to be there with him, and like, hey, you can, if your child is little enough, you can sit on my lap. Or an example of like an older child, like my daughter didn't feel comfortable going into dance alone for a while when she started, or going in and asking at the counter for something. So it's not that big of a deal. It is kind of annoying as you get crankier with multiple kids. You're like, do I need to get out of the car? Like, if I didn't have to get out of the car, I'm happy if I don't have to get out of the car. But you can honor your kid. It's not that big of a deal. It's an extra 2 minutes of your time to turn the car off and go in with your child, and you start something new. It's a little thing, but just try to think back to yourself when you were that age. And I mean, when I think back to myself at a lot of different ages, I just felt alone. That is the resounding feeling that I had. And so that prevents me from, or I shouldn't word it that way, that encourages me to do a lot more things that I would prefer not to do, because I want my kids to know that they're not alone, and that I've got their back, and you've got your kids' backs, to sit there and let them be, and then also, if your child came to you after that and said, "Yes, this is okay, but I don't think I like this very much, and I don't really want to keep doing it." If you didn't spend $1 million to do it, like, it's okay. You can let
it
so
go.
allowing them to quit something that they are no longer interested in, or put something on hold. And I do that with myself too, because my go-to will be that if I sign up for something, I have to stick with it. I have to finish. I have to continue. I have to, no. Newsflash. You're an adult. You can do what you want to do. Even if you paid for something and you don't get a refund, you can still quit it. You don't have to finish. So that's that's a whole different podcast. But
I totally resonate with that. I feel like I'm still on the process of learning that myself, but it's an important lesson for highly sensitive people. So, well, let's before we wrap up, do you have any other sort of parting words of wisdom for highly sensitive parents, or parents of highly sensitive children, either one, who are looking to tap into their intuition?
I think the biggest thing that's made a difference for me is giving myself the freedom not to make a decision right away. I don't think I'm bad at making decisions. I think there's a tendency to put a label on yourself, like, "Oh, are you a bad decision maker? Are you a slow decision maker?" Like, I'm a slow decision maker, but it's because I need all of the information I need to make sure. I don't like to fall on my face. I don't really enjoy failure a whole bunch. That's been something that I've had to like warm up to, because you can't try new things without possibly failing, and I do like new things. So giving yourself that permission to I just had more than a year. I had a very big blog that I built up over 14 years that was in the niche I did PR in, and it took me a lot of years of trying to listen to the intuition. And for me, I'm a Christian, so I feel the intuition also as like God's voice And that sense of like connection with spirituality. So there's that sense too, like if that piece fits for you, you know, you can be praying about the intuitive thoughts and feelings that you're feeling. And I don't think, it's not been my experience that God will tell you something opposite to what your innate intuition feels and
Yeah.
your innate personality. Like those things would be congruous with one another.
Mhm.
But I've just had like a really long period of time where I've been trying to seek out my own intuition, like to the point where I'm doing all kinds of things that I wouldn't normally do because it's like spaghetti, throwing spaghetti on the wall. And it's only been in the last couple of months where the pieces of the puzzle start coming together. And I see like, oh, I have been listening to the intuition. I've been trying to listen to myself. It's just slow. Like
Yeah.
decisions come slowly sometimes. Things don't always come together fast. And this can be true as we're like raising our kids and trying to be intuitive. Like you might have a child who doesn't really have any interests outside of school. And they don't really know what their interest, you know, and you might have questions like, how do I direct this kid? Or, you know, am I there for them enough? I mean, all these questions, just maybe sit with that tension and like hold whatever that question is that you need an answer to. Hold that like in your chest. I worked through some very traumatic things in therapy over the last handful of years, and an image came into my mind as I was doing some of this work. And I even have a picture of this. So those of you who are on the video, it's a picture of a trophy, like a trophy cup, like a gold trophy cup. And the image that came to me was that my soul and my heart, and if you want to throw your gut in there too, you could, is like protected by this incredibly valuable gold cup. And that nobody can permeate that, and that it's my own sacred space to like hold on to. So that's like where the intuition lies for me, is this very sacred space. Like even your partner can say things that aren't helpful. Be careful how you bring them into that, you know. Wait until I found it helps if I kind of have things a little formulated before I
Absolutely.
ask open-ended questions about, you
Yeah.
know, giant things.
Yeah.
So that, you know, focus on your intuition as a part of who you are. You know, it's like your identity and your soul and how God created you, and it's like a very sacred thing. So that would be my takeaway, is like, you know, we each have the opportunity to like listen to this intuition more and tap into ourselves more. And it's a huge blessing and honor that we even have this like ability. Not a lot of, there are people out there who like, this is over there, this is not something that they think about. So we can like honor ourselves, and at the same point honor our kids. It doesn't mean there won't be disappointment, doesn't mean that we might choose to do something that backfires, because that's life.
Right. There's permission given to make mistakes, but there's also a real, you know, when I think the image of the gold trophy, or kind of like this chalice or this protection almost, there's this sense of protection, and like this is I'm allowed to feel this way, and the things that are coming at me, whether it's parenting advice or social media, you know, figureheads they're coming towards you, and this visualization of sort of like having a protection that says, you know what, that's okay for them. I don't need to judge, but what I am intuiting, or the way that I choose to move forward as a person, as a parent, might look different, and that I can honor that. I can protect that, and I can feel confident in, even if I stumble, even if I make some mistakes along the way, that I can really trust and learn to make friends with my intuition and my gut, my heart, my soul, like you said.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Make friends with it. Yeah, that's really nice.
Well, thank you so much for this enlightening conversation. I hope I know I got a lot out of it, just reflecting with a fellow parent, and I hope that listeners, wherever they are on their parenting journey, I'm guessing we'll have people all over the spectrum, from parents of infants to parents of teenagers and beyond, that there's something for everybody here to really reflect on, or to look forward to, or to speak to them where they are right now. So thank you so much, Lauren, for joining us here at the Highly Sensitive Parenthood podcast today.
Yeah, it's great to be here with you. What a great conversation. Thanks, Amy.
And just before we head off, where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
So hspresources.com is where I write about sensitivity. And then laurenhunter.net is my author and coaching platform. And I blog there too.
Awesome. Yes. And I can speak to HSP Journey being a really valuable resource for highly sensitive people, and lots of articles from various HSP experts and thinkers. So definitely recommend heading on over there if you get the chance. All right. Well, thank you so much, Lauren.
Thanks so much.
For more resources, including our signature Highly Sensitive Parenthood online course, visit highlysensitiveparenthood.com.